Good afternoon. I greet you all who joined us today. Olga Burmahin is with you, and Media Center Ukraine Forum continues its work. 127th day of full-scale invasion of Russian Federation into Ukrainian land. I want to thank you all who is speaking about this war and who joins us in telling the truth about what's happening in our country. Recently, Ukraine received status of EU candidate, and we are very happy on that cause. But you understand we have a lot of work ahead of us, and today with our speakers, we will speak about this work about integration into European media space. And I would like to introduce our speakers: Olha Herasymiuk, head of National Council of TV and Radio, and Oleksandr Burmahin, head of a National Council. Please, the floor is yours. Good day, dear colleagues. I'll speak like this because I feel as a journalist. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to see you today offline and to tell you once more, face to face, that National Council constantly speaks that we today we bow to each who works in our profession today on the informational front and fights on the informational front and resists Russian propaganda informational front. This is extremely important. And the world knows about it. And European colleagues that I spoke to about this, they also asked to thank you. And it's very sad that today our country is the hottest spot for the journalists. And such amount of our colleagues will not return from the battlefield sacrificing their lives for serving the society, the community. We live in historical times. Historical it is because we recently, in these conditions, we received the status of candidates of the EU, and this status obliges us to many things. You know that there are 7 points of reforms, 7 blocks of reforms that we have to implement. Among them, one of them, very important, that we'll speak about today is media reform. The European Union notified about precise steps that they expect from Ukraine that's approving the law of media. The law of media. It's expressed in opinions. You can look it up. I will not emphasize that you all know that we all live in obsolete media legislation that was approved in the beginning of our independence that absolutely does not provide any resistance to, because it was calculated for peace times when we had not aggressor next to us, but so-called brother or sister, so-called. Now, those definitions are not contemporary, of course, but let's go through what we face, what is in front of us. Had a lot of work ahead of us. About the work, the EU clearly notified 3 key positions that we have to stipulate in that law of media that will be presented soon in the parliament. 3 key positions. First position: overcoming excessive private interests in media space of Ukraine. Clear. Second, implementation Ukrainian legislation clauses of the European Directive about audiovisual media services. And third is enforcing the role of national regulator, meaning National Council of Ukraine, that regulates media space. What's important to say? This project is being worked on for years, and this year, it's 10 years that Ukraine strives to conduct this reform. We think that today is the time. And this draft law that we're speaking about, it was thoroughly processed by the representatives of National Council, Oleksandr Burmahin, that you see here, member of National Council, started working on this draft law as a representative of civil society, because this law is worked on by media experts, representatives of industry, MPs, the our European partners also help in their expertise, and as a consequence of those discussions, there is approved a compromise draft law, a compromise draft law. It is registered in the parliament, and it could become the basis for fast and holistic implementation of the EU terms, because it's absolutely ready for first voting. 3 key positions. First, remember, overcoming excessive private interests in media space of Ukraine. It's a question. It's not even a condition of the EU. It's the requirement of civil society. Ukraine civil society is interested in it. What this draft law provides? How we will reach that? First, analysis of finance transparency of media, for which money this media operate. Second is overcoming the problem of non-transparency of the property, and how we respond to the facts of non-transparency of ownership and non-compliance to the requirements of this law. And third is avoiding the misuse at election campaigns. We all know how that works and how that makes bias the public opinion. The draft law will stop it. We all know that overcoming excessive private interests, it's the clause of so-called anti-oligarch law, but it's a topic for a different discussion. Second point, implementation of Ukrainian legislation, the clause of EU directives of audiovisual media services. The directive, please see this directive, dear colleagues, when we will support this law of media in the parliament. Please read it thoroughly. It serves as the guideline for regulating all kinds of media services, from standard media to joint platforms for joint access to video. In our opinion, this law of media overall implements all the requirements of directives overall. At the same time, we keep consulting with the European experts to the max, include the clauses in the directive in the draft law that will be voted on. The consultancies are ongoing as we speak, and they are quite intensive. More details my colleague will notify. The third point that I recalled is enforcing the role of national regulator. You see, national regulator, we are the people that actively try to support media space, especially today in the war conditions. We work quite closely with all the journalists for our community to receive high quality information, that we fight against disinfo. So Article 30 of the EU directive that I was speaking about, this article defines necessity of independent activity of national regulators, because functional independence is important from any influence from the state or from private structure, from commercial interests. And we live in a new time. It's a digital transformation time. That's a different media space than it used to be, and other than it's reflected in the contemporary law, in the current law. It was drafted before we had cell phones. We advanced a lot, and we all know how that works in digital community. The life is quite different, and it's fast. It keeps changing. Therefore, this law has to absolutely reflect that. And we have digital country that we're proud of. Those who are abroad that know how foreigners are astonished by our simple ability to pay with a telephone or find documents in the telephone. It's a great success. And the president of Ukraine aimed his program at digital stage development. This is irreversible process enduring the war that works also for defense and enforcing the role of media regulator here is important, because digital time also provides abilities for a digital attack on our informational space. Therefore, enforcing the role of media regulator in this process is one more step for it to be transparent, fair, a non-biased, competitive environment, and equal rights and independence of media. Dear colleagues, the draft law of media that I report to you about is supported by the EU countries. When it was registered, all the main countries of the EU, they said in Twitter and their messages, it's all publicly available, they with their support to the voting the first draft of this law. And the European Union that voiced those three requirements to us, they also addressed that it's necessary to consider this draft law in the first reading. To which, as I've said, this draft law is fully prepared to. Questions you could be able to ask to Oleksandr Burmahin, who is one of the developers and moderators of the working group that gathers on a regular basis. It's a national council, experts from civil society, media industry, and the European Union representatives. And using the opportunity, I will have to speak of one topic that is fighting against Russian propaganda. We constantly monitor informational space. For National Council, it's most important task to work on it. And we practically fulfill a task of informational shield. And recently, full-scale aggression. As soon as full-scale aggression started, National Council addressed the European Union on 26th to all colleagues in all European countries. We're calling them to block Russian TV channels, to block Russian propaganda. And over 30 countries replied to our request, and we continue this work because we cannot stop there. When we received first sanction package in which 2 channels, Sputnik and Russia Today, were blocked, Russians attempted to find loopholes, because in each European country there was their own Russian Today Germany, Russian Today other countries, and they were trying to find loopholes. However, the current package that we actively work on, all the country and national regulator also, they included 3 more Russian propagandist channels, and Belarusian as well. We keep track on how our colleagues in Europe, how they remove those propagandists from the networks. Our monitoring service, they show that all those screens are black, all those screens are dark. We have a big list of propagandists that have to be removed and blocked, and we gave the list to the institutions that are responsible for promoting this case in packages. Those channels were blocked and sanctioned for a long time in Ukraine by us. They're blocked in media. So this work is a daily work, because they always try to find another way to enter media space, those propagandists. It's very important, and we want to continue exchanging information with regulators. We record all the Russians wherever they are. When we transfer to the institutions that would react to it, we give it to the European colleagues, so they see that Russians don't only bombard us with their efforts, they threaten Europe as well. It's very important for Europe. So, dear colleagues, practically what I was briefly reporting to you about, and we'll disseminate the main thesis that we wanted to convey to you. It's reflected in this draft law of media that as soon as possible has to be voted on in the Parliament. We're working with the European colleagues here, with the EU, with the Office of in the Chamber of Ministers, the Office of Ms. Stefanishina, with the MPs, with civil society. On this is our obligation so it's implemented as soon as possible, because we're all convinced, I think, as we are, that solidity and sustainability of candidacy depends on it as well. Otherwise, as you understand, we could have problems. But in this issue, we are moving forward. Thank you. Please tell us, in this media draft law, do you have a feeling that there's enough political will to pass it? What are the optimistic perspective? Can we will we pass it until the end of the year? I would like to propose also that Mr. Alexander would answer to those questions, because he's thoroughly working on this draft law. And on your question, I will answer with yes. Such political will exists, and recently there was a meeting at the President's office on approving the main requirements of the EU regarding the EU's candidacy, and it was spoken about, defined the closest terms. Such political will as from authors, the MPs, and the industry as well, because working actively, this group that is moderated by Alexander, such political will we have, but firstly, it's the requirement of civil society. All those are defenders that, while we discuss this and we're trying to enforce the rear, those defenders, they expect from us that this rear will be defended well. And this law gives informational front. It's an informational war that is conducted for a long time. It started a long time before the full-scale invasion. It's always like this. So we were a bit... Nobody expected that our neighbor will be that barbarian. And our discussions, they lagged. Today, we don't see those who actively tried to stop this media law. They're particularly gone. Some of them disappeared and they're abroad because they worked actively from within via request of our enemy that wanted to attack us. And I'll speak the general opinion that this political will exists. Thank you. Senator, can you add something? Dear colleagues, see if there are questions more precise. Dear colleagues. Question to both speakers. From foreign journalists, we heard that in Ukrainian media there is enough of freedom. Would it mean that your integration, media integration, would restrict Ukrainian journalists? First, that's the first question. A second is our community. It suffered the state of newspapers. There is a draft law of military newspaper. Would it not be the step back that there is no state newspapers? In the part of formulas of EU requirements, I will try to answer like this. The freedom of speech, as the majority of rights and freedoms, is not absolute. In any case, it could be subject to certain defined restrictions, and it's important how they are imposed. And regretfully, except for high-level freedom, partners also, especially during the elections, they're registering systematic and constant manipulations from media with information for the benefit of some interested parties. And how the EU formulated their requirements, decreasing the private impact on media space, enforcing the role of regulator in its independence. Implementation of the directive speaks that they see certain balanced approach to improving regulation. From one side, we can have to implement clearly the guideline that directive is to the fuller extent, and also have to have a regulator and not the watcher, not the observer. Returning to the elections, the situation is that there is no regulator for the internet. For press, is just formal, and for TV and radio, the council, we can just observe and not react to certain violations or misuse. And for me, the European Union approach and its requirements as they formulate that certain balance. And as far as I think, it has to improve the situation that exists in Ukraine and regulating media sphere. In the part of military newspaper, we can say, as regulator, that the request for certain things in informational space that are related to active counteraction of Russian propaganda and overall informational component is integral component of war of Russia against Ukraine since 2014. We're speaking about it, but regretfully, level of legislation, we didn't do anything. Regretfully, but I think as a temporary means during martial law, certain special norms or special approaches, and providing the opportunities to military to publish their media, like questions on Army FM radio. I think that they could exist, but in conditions of martial law and for that special period, not in peaceful time. Thank you. More questions, dear colleagues? Shimoska Radio Company, Taragamberwa. It's more of a theoretical strategic question. We all believe in our victory and fast return, we hope, of recently occupied territories in Crimea. Do we have to account? Do we keep track on what Russians are taking from us? Not only post physical, material losses and necessity to renew the media on those territories. There are problems in Lugansk and Donetsk region. The resources destroyed in Severodonetsk. There was was airing to the south of broadcasting to the south of Ukraine. Then on top of your integration, we will be creating a strategy on broadcasting, on mental return of our people there. I can start. We keep a close eye on the situation, on occupation of certain frequencies and collaborationism that exists from media on the occupied territories. Also, National Council on constantly asks colleagues and keeps statistics of the media that stopped broadcasting for financial reasons, or those who require assistance, or what kind of assistance they need, and our communication also. Right, so we have this, so to speak, map of broadcasting, of media, of problems of media in Ukraine, related to military aggression of Russian Federation. Therefore, we clearly understand what problems exist where, and what situation is right now. It's very dynamic and it changes every day. Sometimes for better, because occupants moved from the north of Ukraine, Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kyiv regions. A lot of media returned, and broadcasting was renewed on those territories. As in the consequent second part, we hope that there will be systematic approach to renewing broadcasting and to support of media in Ukraine after our victory, because we create a council of renewal of Ukraine, and one of the components of operation of this council, we as Regulator were participating in that, in operation of a subcommittee that was working under Ministry of Culture and Informational Policy, and this subgroup was involved with issues on what is our status right now, what is in the closer future, what we'll have to do immediately after victory, at first 10 years, to renew the market, to renew the broadcasting, to renew or to use certain leader positions that Ukraine received in the path-paced war in regional and world scale for broadcasting our agenda on European and world level also. And as far as I know, this work of the subgroup will be defended on the top level on the Global Chamber of Ministers next week, and there are precise figures there. And one of the key moments is physically destroyed infrastructure, property of media, and other problems that require funds. And it was partially with the nationalization of media or just of industry, it was calculated. Thank you. More questions? Wanted to add something? Directly, my colleagues said everything, and we made a survey. National Council spread a questionnaire among media of Ukraine, and today we have roughly about more than 500 replies from our media that we question, we ask who has what problems during the war, what is necessary. We cooperate with the Chamber of Ministers that expects proposals from us. We analyze them, roughly 700 of media. We disseminated the questionnaire among them, and we expect till the end of the week to receive the full picture. And having analyzed that, we'll work on the support program. We'll also work with international partners and some foreign institutions. Recently had direct contact with UNESCO, with their management of the department that already signed memorandums with UNESCO to support media. Firstly, we will care for regional media because it requires that support. There are examples of collaboration that Oleksandr said, but we're happy that at the times when somebody refuses from licenses, there are examples when, on the contrary, our colleagues that before the war received licenses from them, they notify us that they start broadcasting. It's our informational offense. And we hear questions from territories that are most vulnerable. Chernihiv region, we knew what happened there. And our colleagues start broadcasting there. Before the war, National Council, just before the war, we were in Chernihiv region where all the medias gathered, and we were speaking what could happen and what we should prepare to. And we visited Donetsk region. All the media of Donetsk were there. And I also want to say that Donetsk media, there were astonishing examples of resistance they demonstrate. And recently, we awarded our colleagues with awards of National Council for their courage. There are representatives of Lugansk media, of Donetsk media. We were happy to give awards to the head rabbi of Ukraine, who, when we're looking how to support in Sumy, just completely destroyed infrastructure of regional broadcasters. He, with his expense, helped the broadcasters. And we were happy to thank Rabbi for his prayers for Ukraine together with all of us and for all this help. That's just one, two examples, but there are many examples. Also, we're writing. Please look at our website of the National Council. There is a page called Media Heart of Ukraine. We write about our colleagues and from regions, and we speak of their stories, and they deserve a good documentary. That's the least we can do to support them. Just look at the examples of heroism and courage that they demonstrate. Regretfully, many of those who we saw in Chernihiv and Donetsk, not many, luckily, but some of them will not meet again, and we'll remember those faces. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Olha Herasymiuk was with us, head of National Council of Ukraine on issues of TV and radio broadcasting. Oleksandr Burmahin, a member of the National Council. Dear colleagues, I will remind you that at 2:30 there will be next briefing where we'll speak about situation on the front line.